Continuing the Chronicles of Hildegoth the First, copyright 2017 by Stuart Staub, all rights reserved worldwide. Chapter 5. Blaze Rye is unique amongst the greater pantheon of Aman, as he is the only god of an element that mortals can create. It is through him that all fires burn, from the touch of flint to tinder, to the burning wara channeled by Warwicks, to the broiling furnaces that fuel a dragon's breath. True worshippers of Blaze Rye are not those obsessed with the destruction of all things by fire. They pay tribute to their deity by following his example with their gift. Fire is to be used as a tool, whether to cook meals, warm hands, or light catapult pitch ablaze. Control is necessary for this ravenous beast, lest it devour all in its path. Abusers of this gift, whether they claim allegiance to the god of fire or not, can be amongst the most destructive creatures to walk the face of Hildegoth. No history of this god's past exists in mortal hands, but of the few who have seen him, his visage ranges from a tall, thin, lanky fellow crowned with a flowing mane of hair, the hue of his element's namesake, to a towering titan composed of flame with eyes of white-hot pits that can set stone afire with a glance. Perhaps he, like his element, is never truly known. Perhaps he is simply depended upon and feared. The aging, slender fellow waved off his friends, one new and one old, and sat back in his chair. It was a pleasant enough day, and recent efforts had proven both wise and fruitful. The results of these efforts had yet to play out, but he was confident that all the best choices had been made. He smiled at the way life can hand you its veiled offerings. They were either gems or offal, and you would not know which until you unwrapped the paper to inspect for gleam or grime. As he peered through a window and down the street, he pondered whether or not the gleam of some was covered with a coat or two of grime. This thought had not quite faded when there was a sudden pounding on his door. He made a noise that was a combination of sigh, groan, and curse, and made his way towards the noise. Deciding not to engage in any prestidigitation, he simply opened it. A young man, his chest heaving, stood just outside. He had obviously been running for some time. He handed the silvered gentleman a roll of parchment stoppered with wax. Close inspection revealed an enward sigil that told the handlers of said document that something rather nasty would happen if anyone, other than for whom it was intended, tried to open it.
"Well, I certainly hope that it's for me, then,"
he said, and pulled the stopper out. A puff of green smoke and light, and the parchment unrolled. He read the contents carefully, his face straight and emotionless. At first, the young messenger simply waited for his recipient to read his letter, but in due time and between breaths he said,
"The High King wishes for you to send word back, sir."
The old fellow turned to look at him.
"Does he now? Very well, tell him that I will be there before you are even halfway back."
The boy blinked.
Begging your pardon, Mr. Canthus, but how would you go about doing that?"
He blinked.
Sir."
Canthus smiled a very elvish smile.
"By employing one of the many tricks I have up my sleeve, young man. Tricks that I've been perfecting for the last, 1,000 years or so."
He waved him off.
"Now, off with you. I have to decide on something."
The boy, taken aback at Canthus's millennial reference, stood where he was, unmoving.
"Decide, sir?"
Canthus nodded vigorously and a little impatiently.
Yes, I must decide if the air temperature and time of year will mean flight is faster for a raven or a hawk."
He paused.
"A hawk, probably, but I might look a bit odd. Ravens, though, tend to be harbingers of ill tidings. Oh, bother it all."
The messenger made a postulation.
"Aren't drakes or dragons the fastest?"
Canthus regarded him coldly.
"Oh, dear lad, have you not a wit in your head? Of course they're the fastest, but they are hardly a covert means of travel, now are they? In a half-dozen wing strokes, I'd have every man-at-arms, mercenary, and noble knight on the bloody continent trying to shoot me out of the sky, wanting to make names for themselves. No, I think—"
He snapped his fingers.
"Perfect! A meadowlark. Inconsequential and quite swift. How does that sound?"
The boy shrugged.
"Sounds perfect, sir." "Excellent. Now, off with you, and don't forget to shut the door."
He did not. Later that night, after many simple yet heartfelt tales of where Gibron's recent wanderings had taken him, after the children had sat there wide-eyed until they quite literally collapsed with excitement-induced exhaustion, after Gibron had sat and watched Derry clutch his two most precious possessions to his chest and carry them, one on each arm, to bed, after all these things, Gibron told Derry in quick, hushed strokes about the gorillas. He mentioned their number and that he had killed one of them, and that the rest had fled back into the woods. He did not want to mention that he had dispatched the lot of the creatures for fear of sounding unbelievable or inhuman. The deception did not sit well with him, but a boast would probably be ignored at exactly the wrong time by exactly the right person. It was believed that too many eyes would be on him, and how, most likely, no ordinary man could have done so. Derrick held his face in his hands as a horrible, unspoken list of possibilities played across his mind.
"Gibron, I must offer my heartfelt thanks once more, as well as my lifelong service. If you had not been there—"
He peered at him intently.
"If you had not been there,"
he repeated softly. Gibron stood resolutely, uncomfortable with the situation, but sympathetic with Derrick's fear of what could have happened. A fruitless but unavoidable union of the thinking mind and the loving heart. "I did what anybody would have done. You owe me nothing." Derrick took a long breath and idly ran his fingers through his beard.
"Your humility becomes you, traveler, but you simply do not understand. The people of this town would have watched them die. Some would have even been pleased by the idea."
He ground his teeth in disgust. Gibron could tell there was more hiding in this statement, but did not press it. Derrick continued.
"I would quite simply be nothing without my children. After losing Arya, they have become the center of my life, my heart, my soul."
Gibron's brow furrowed. Derrick read his question right off his features.
I know. If I care so deeply for them, why let them wander so far?" "Well, to be honest, I forbid them to wander much beyond the town boundaries. I'll have a good, long talk with the both of them on the morrow. When they misbehave, they are reprimanded, but I take all care in making certain that I do not let anger or irritation affect my judgment. I always make certain that the punishment befits the crime. In all else, however, I want them to live free and happy, to have as full a life as our little Camder can provide."
He stood and filled his mug again from the ale barrel which he had moved into the living room earlier. Standing, he took a deep pull from it.
"If either of them decide to move on later in life, it will pain me, but not nearly as much as the thought of quelling their lives in even the smallest fashion. If they want to trek on to Grianne, Tallow, Fremet, or even Tiniar, for all I care, they may go with the knowledge that their father blesses them with all his heart and good wishes."
Gibron still felt grumbly and at odds with his ways of child-rearing, but his reasoning now seemed rather hollow and old-fashioned when he really looked at it. Both of Derrick's children were educated, clean, well-fed, and well-mannered, if a little too curious. However, he was open-minded enough to see that that may simply be his sensitivity to prying questions more than anything else. Finally, he said, "I think more parents should let their hearts and their minds guide their actions with their children." Derrick raised his mug and nodded.
"And I wish there were more people as willing as you to take a step back and see things for what they are."
Gibron again saw something hidden in his statement, though he did raise his flagon as well. "There are people here who do not?" Derrick sighed and shook his head rather sadly.
"There always are there not?"
He made his way to his room, where a window peeked out over the small piece of land between his cottage and the one nearest it to the north. Here there were yet more books piled at the nightstand and arranged precariously about a worn desk. The man was clearly self-educated, and it did him and his children credit. He beckoned Gibran near and pointed toward the lighted window of his neighbor. He could plainly see an old man and woman peering from this window, one of them with a looking-glass. He pinched his features in annoyance. Spies? Derrick chuckled lightly, but there was some concern in it. A bit more than that. The fellow was called Unger Whitley. He was a high-ranking captain in the old militia. He is one of 3 such old soldiers left, and he has the magistrate's and the town council spokesman's ear. He leaned on the sill, eyeing his 2 observers as they passed the spyglass back and forth. He and Gibran were in complete darkness, so the espionage would reveal nothing. A few turns before Arya died, he came to me demanding that I have my wife brought to the village Warwick to cleanse her soul of demons before she expired. I tried to explain to him the causes behind her illness, but then he simply accused me of being in league with whatever malevolent forces had taken over my wife's body. Gibran growled low in his throat. He caught himself before the sound took on too much of a bestial quality. I have encountered such fools myself. Derrick snorted. I think we all have. Even so, I asked him what possible reasoning he had behind his accusations. He said that he saw Arya reading to the children out of a book that he did not recognize, a book with a black cover. I told him that I did not know of any such book, which was true. I cared not a whit, by the way, but nonetheless that was hardly proof enough to level a charge of demon possession against someone. Gibran agreed with a grunt. He said that if that wasn't it, that it must certainly be a piece of a larger puzzle. When I asked him what in all the hells he meant by that, he claims he saw Wendenell speaking to a squirrel out near the large twisted oak tree between our properties. He said she told it to do things, tricks and such, and it did them. He waggled his fingers mock menacingly. Utter nonsense. Gibran stiffened slightly. Wendenell had showed passing interest in the fact that he had spoken to his warhorse. He wondered now if perhaps the reason she seemed more pleased and impressed was because such abilities were nothing new to her. Derrick continued. I called him a bothersome sneak with nothing better to do than to spy on little girls. He stomped off in a huff. 2 days afterward, my wife received a summons from the town magistrate's aide, who doubles as constable. She was to stand trial for demon possession. He sighed harshly. The crusty old bastard had probably gone straight to the magistrate or his little toady Sallet, a self-appointed aide who was some sort of disgraced royal champion in exile, and demanded that it take place. Being the loved old war hero that he was, the magistrate ordered it immediately. Gibran stared at the side of Derrick's face. She was ordered to stand trial in her condition? Derrick nodded slowly. Aye, but it really didn't matter. She died a day before the date of her inquiry. Gibran closed his eyes. Barbaric. Yes, it was. I sent letter after letter to the town council about her condition and how it was caused. Several very expensive works hired by her family and well-versed in her condition backed up my claims. He smirked. I have yet to hear back. Even when I happen across them at the town hall, they are always far too busy. They were both silent a moment. Then Gibran said, So your neighbor's been after you ever since? In a manner of speaking, he mostly just wants to look important and powerful. Rumor has it he knows a bit of Warwicking, so maybe he's looking to replace the one we already have. She's kind of an idiot. Gibran smiled. So, he spies on you in hopes of catching what, exactly? Oh, in hopes of catching me and my children in the midst of one of our sinister demonic incantations. Maybe he thinks I conjured up that ugly scab of a horse eating my grass by the fence. Gibran forced an offended look to his face. Hey, that horse has been my only companion for the last 6 years. Derrick donned a look of mild alarm. Oh, by the gods, Gibran muttered. Tripped head first into that one now, didn't I? Both men shared another bout of barely stifled laughter, tilting back their drinks in a manner that males have made synonymous with camaraderie for as long as there has been drinking in men. Gibran said, "Were you working for the magistrate at the time all this happened?"
Oh, yes. I doubt that I have been able to secure the job afterward. Even so, there have been over-the-shoulder mutterings and narrow glances abounding. The magistrate is a good enough man, but he tends to lean towards the quickest route to whatever will keep the peace. Sometimes that's a good thing.
He shrugged and took another pull from his mug.
And sometimes not.
Have you thought of leaving, moving from here to another town? Derek sighed softly.
Constantly, but I cannot. The children love it here, and so do I, really. The few friends I have are very good friends, and I honestly can't make myself tuck my tail between my legs and run.
He leaned on the sill.
Arya would want me to stay and fight. I just know it.
Both men drank quietly and said little, though an occasional muffled laugh escaped their lips as they watched Mr. Whitley and his wife watch them. The old curmudgeons continued their important observations long after Gibran and Derek had given up and went to bed, and were either unaware or uncaring that, backlit in their window, they were quite neatly silhouetted against the night and looked completely ridiculous. Gibran had, for as far back as he could remember, found it difficult to sleep under a roof. It was not exactly a phobia of any real sort. More like he found the scene of the sky a comforting thing to rest his eyes on before sleep finally overtook him, whether it was a dusting of stars or rolling storm clouds. Musing at such, he lost himself in the twilight heavens. There was a full moon that night. Gibran was far too old for the night's luminary watchman to force a change, but he felt the all too familiar slight tug at his soul to bring out the beast and hunt. He tapped it away with hardly a thought. He far preferred the human tendency to just gaze at it and wonder. Wandinelle was sleeping quietly in her bed through the window nearest to him. Every few minutes he would glance at her silently resting form, and that almost a smile twitch of his lips would wriggle to his mouth with far stronger insistence than the beast in his heart. He knew that her brother was in his own visit to slumber a few feet from her bed. He could clearly hear him snoring, though the sound would have been slight to human ears. He had not slept soundly enough to snore for longer than he could remember. It was so odd. His resiliency to death was bettered by few, yet when he learned of his handful of weaknesses, the possibility of being attacked while he rested kept him at odds with sleep far more often than when he had been mortal and could sleep in the middle of a battle with only a single wounded friend standing watch over him. He looked out again at the moon. It seemed to return his gaze. No longer a thing for him to fear, it was more like a wrongly maligned companion that had waited all these years to show him that all it ever wanted to give him was a few hours of peace during the night. He almost regretted the decades he spent hiding from it, despite its previously uncontrollable effects over him. He felt remorse for the past. He felt wonder for the night. He felt good about himself for the first time since he had crushed the life out of a gorul to save the neck of a friend 3 decades ago. For a few moments he wondered if any of his old comrades were still alive. Perhaps someday he would seek them out. He smiled at the thought, this time all the way. Gibran awoke before the first fingers of the sun chased away the grey stillness of pre-dawn. He sat up, feeling well-rested and alert, and smiled in subtle approval as he met Derek coming out the front door, already scrubbed and dressed in his guardsman tunic and mail. He smelled the dusky sweat of 3 horses coming down the path well before they actually arrived. After a few seconds, the pounding of hooves became clearly audible. Derek put his hands on his hips as they rounded the bend. 2 men clad in mail like he rode escort to a third, who was draped in a flowing tunic of an absurdly bright blue. The curve of a large crossbow was outlined under this man's cloak. "Good morning," Gibron said to Derrig as he strapped on his leather vest and tied back his hair. "Who are they?"
"Good morning,"
Derrig snorted.
"2 of them are friends. 1 is not."
It was not very difficult to discern which was which, for as the blue-garbed rider drew near, Gibron could see a clear look of disdain on his pock-marked face, one that deepened when he and the others drew their mounts to a halt. He nodded sourly.
"Good morrow, Derrig."
It was an archaic, slightly stilted manner of greeting. Derrig returned it curtly.
"Good morrow, Salet."
Gibron recalled his brief mention of him the previous night. He had only said his name once, but it stuck in his head as someone unpleasant. He lifted his chin slightly in Gibron's direction.
"Morrow,"
he said simply. Gibron stood impassively and folded arms that looked as broad as Salet's waist across his chest. "Morning," he muttered through the corner of his mouth. The cratered visage fixed on him for a good long moment, then looked away.
"Who is this man, Derrig? I've never seen him before." "He is a recent acquaintance, a traveler that quite literally saved my children's lives. He brings fearful news with him as well."
Salet hopped down from his horse. The crossbow on the back of his mount was covered in a leather case and clearly massive. It seemed all the larger as Salet himself was not a man of much stature. He strode over to them in a strutting, overly regal manner, as the men-at-arms assigned to him followed, though they seemed to do so a bit grudgingly. He drew up to Gibron and peered at his face from a foot beneath it.
"What provident happenstance, then, that you were in the area, Lord—"
He leaned over slightly, extending his right leg in almost a curtsy, and offered his hand. Gibron took it firmly. The little man's grip was like a bag of matchsticks. "Gibron, and yes, it was lucky that I was where I was." Salet stared up at him. Gibron stared back. Derrig said,
"Salet, why exactly are you here?"
Salet released his hand and looked at Derrig.
"Last night you were seen conversing with an unknown fellow."
He glanced back at Gibron.
"Until far past what would be considered a respectable hour for one of the magistrate's personal guard."
Derrig smirked.
"How absolutely hedonistic of me. Staying up past my bedtime."
He looked over at Gibron.
"With an unknown fellow, no less."
He nodded, looking serious.
"Shall you execute me here, or would you prefer to take me into the village square to make a public spectacle out of me?"
Salet frowned.
"These are serious times, Derrig."
"Yes, they are." Derrig strode towards the aide to the magistrate, towering over him as well. With Gibron at his side, they outmassed him fourfold.
"And I wonder, you repugnant little toad, when you and that dried-up old excuse for a soldier,"
he jerked his head in Whitley's direction,
"will become aware of just how serious these times are. Perhaps sometime after you are through pestering me and my family."
Salet, impressively, had stood his ground without so much as a flinch, even at the insult. He indulged Derrig with a greasy smile.
"I do not understand. What are you saying?" "Gibron has seen a pack of gorulls hardly a mile from here."
He held his hand up as Salet opened his mouth to speak.
"I realize that it is extremely uncommon for these creatures to come so close to our town, but I believe what he says. My children can corroborate it."
Salet snorted.
"Your children? Ah."
He nodded slowly.
"I wonder, Treasure, is their word as golden as their mother's is?"
Derrig's jaw muscles rippled, visible even beneath his beard.
"Or was, rather?"
The big farmer and guardsman appeared perfectly calm, but one hand slowly moved to a wicked hand-axe, one of 2, that he had at his waist. A sudden shout came from behind Salet.
"Derrig, hold your hand!"
Derrig glanced to the other guardsman, whom he knew well and called friend. The man spoke softly but clearly.
"Keep your splitters away from your fingers, friend, please."
Derrig, fuming, did as he was asked. The aide sneered. The other guardsman continued.
And you, Salad, whether or not you truly believe this mule's spit about Derrick's wife being infested with demons, I would think you would at least have the wit to not insult a man who can part another man's skull in two from 50 feet away.
Salad spat over his shoulder without turning.
Might I remind you, commoner, that you are here at my pleasure to protect me against this peasant, not defend him? If he were to attack, it is your duty to take the blow.
The other guardsman clucked.
Oh, Salad, come off it. You're half as important as you thought you were. The High King himself would have his nose buried so deep in your backside so often you'd never need escort, because you'd be unable to go anywhere without dragging the good king behind you.
There was a brief rumble of barely muffled laughter from all but Gibran and Salad at this. The latter, of course, did not find any humor in it for obvious reasons. Gibran, however, was reminded of a man too young to be in command, and who knew nothing of what being in command entailed. He'd sent wave after wave of men to die, all of them needlessly, simply because he would not admit his thinking was faulty. He was short, covered with cratered scars of ruptured boils, and as self-righteous as a monk in a tavern brawl. He could not possibly be the same man, but the similarities were bothersome. Then the memory slipped away. As the laughter died down, Salad reached into a fold of his robe and brought forth a folded parchment. He handed it to Derrick with his mouth clamped shut on his words, turned and stomped over to his horse. He mounted quickly and rode back the way he had come with hardly a backward glance. His two escorts waved grimly and then took their time to catch up as the aide disappeared around the bend. Gibran's scowl was not alone. One formed on Derrick's face that could have been its twin as he unrolled the message and read it silently. "What is it?" he asked. "A council inquiry." Gibran blinked. "You're to be tried?" His friend shook his head. "Not exactly. It's more like a trial to see if there needs to be a trial." "That's ridiculous." Derrick sighed. "Well, yes, it is, but that is the way we do things in Camdur." Gibran found the children's scent on the air. They were waking. "Does the High King know of this? I'm not completely clear on his mandates for outlying kingdoms, but I don't think he'd approve of such treatment." Derrick laughed derisively, a harsh, abrupt bark. "If the rumors and tales of his kindness are true, then I am sure he would not. But he governs what? 12 kingdoms? More? And that statement doesn't really appreciate Arathai, the largest of them all. I somehow doubt he could find the time to correct a few civic discrepancies in our backward little village, my friend." Gibran's cheek twitched in irritation. "These are more than discrepancies, Derrick, and you damn well know it." Derrick nodded slowly. "I know, Gibran, but to men with as much power and as little time as good King Merit, they would only be labeled as discrepancies if you were even made aware of it." "Daddy?" Wendenell asked as she wandered out of the front door of their cottage, her hair a tangled mess and her eyes puffy with sleep. "What's going on? Why are the red men laughing at you?" "Wendy, hush!" Derrick snapped. Gibran looked at her, confused. "Red men? You mean the guardsmen?" She shook her head. "Wendenell, go inside and fix your brother some breakfast," Derrick snapped. She took a few backward steps. "But what about you?" "I will be fine. Go now." She stared at him, confused, then dutifully turned tail and went back into the house. Gibran put the same question to Derrick. "Who were the red men?" He waved it away. She is a very imaginative girl. She often dreams of fairies with red skin and wings. She calls them the red men. She must have heard everyone laughing and put that sound to her dreams. Gibran looked at him incredulously. Again, he was hiding something. There was the tang of discomfort that was nearly fear in his scent. This was common with deception. He did not press the issue. Derrick folded the parchment abruptly and shoved it in his tunic. "You may stay here as long as you like, Gibran. Wendenell and Fabius obviously like you, and so do I. I will no doubt be dealing with this inquiry for a day or so, during which the children would normally have to fend for themselves." Gibran chewed the inside of his cheek. He knew what was coming and headed it off. I will look after them for as long as you need, but would it not be better if I came with you? Derek scowled in thought.
I would welcome a company, but no. Your presence would most likely stir the pot of dissent that Unger and Salet have placed before the magistrate.
He shook his head.
They shan't do anything drastic at a preliminary inquiry. I will see what they claim at the very least. Perhaps I can even stopper it up before it spills its nonsense over everything.
His lips pulled into a taut, grim line.
Well and good, then.
His previous manner of jovial sarcasm had been uprooted and supplanted with cynical, simmering anger. He went into the house, kissed and held his children, and told them that business would have to keep him away for a few more days.
But you've only just returned,
Wendenell said over a sad frown.
I know, little Petal, he said, brushing a finger down her nose, but this can't wait. I wish it could.
He kissed her cheek and then tousled Fabius's hair, whose face was locked into a rictus of bothered melancholy.
I tell you this much, though. At least this time you'll have someone to watch you and to keep you out of trouble.
He winked. It almost worked. He stood and clasped Gibron's hand strong.
My friend, though saving the lives of my children has made me eternally indebted to you, I am certain that I would have sensed your honor even if you had done nothing more than pass through town.
Gibron shook his hand solemnly.
You are too kind, Derek. Though if I were you, I'd cover that worm Salet with curdled milk and then toss him into a pit of wild boars.
You really should not have to endure this. He tilted his head slightly towards the children. Nor should they. Derek shook his head.
No, we should not. However, I am a man who has sworn to uphold our laws. As such, I cannot say that I alone am above them, can I?
Gibron could always find holes in such thinking, but realized that this was neither the time nor the place to discuss it. Besides, it probably would not change this man's mind.
No, I suppose not.
They released hands, and Derek said,
A day, then. 3 at the most.
The grizzled old soldier nodded. I'll be here.